My infidelity destroyed my husband, and now I'm the one crying for him. My name is Laura. I'm 35 years old, and I don't know if I'm a good person. That's a question I've been asking myself silently for a long time, especially when I'm alone, in bed, during those dead hours when there's no one to fake a smile for, when I no longer have to keep up the act. I've grown used to carrying myself with my head held high, as if I weren't consumed by the guilt that eats me alive inside. But if you saw me alone, if you could see what I hide behind the way I walk, the way I talk, behind every cold gesture and calculated phrase, you'd know the truth. I destroyed the only person who truly loved me, and now it's my turn to cry for him that I wasn't always like this, or so I like to think. As a child, I was cheerful, perhaps overly sensitive. I was an only child for the first 8 years of my life, until my sister was born and displaced me with an ease that still stings. From then on, I learned to yield space, to toughen up, to disguise my need for affection as independence. I learned to please, to be loved, not for who I was, but for what others needed me to be. I molded myself easily to others' desires, as if the only thing that mattered was that they wouldn't abandon me, wouldn't leave, wouldn't replace me again, that I had many partners before getting married. Nothing lasting. I never felt truly at home with anyone. I was always searching for something more passion, more attention, more words. When I didn't find it, I left. I told myself it wasn't my fault, that I couldn't settle, that I had the right to seek happiness. Pretty words that hid what I didn't want to admit. I didn't know how to love anyone. I only knew how to take, use, demand, and run away. Then Daniel came along. He was different, but I wasn't, and that's my tragedy. I met Daniel when I was 27, at a reunion of old university classmates. Ironically, he hadn't studied with us. He was there accompanying his cousin Javier, a loud guy who dominated every conversation. Daniel, on the other hand, stayed mostly on the sidelines, holding a beer, barely smiling, as if he didn't feel entirely comfortable. I noticed him, of course. There was something intriguing about his quiet presence. He didn't try to seduce, didn't interrupt, didn't draw attention to himself. He just observed, listened, nodded, as if he understood something the rest of us didn't. I approached him out of curiosity, at first. He didn't say much. He seemed to weigh every word. He told me he worked at a municipal library, loved ancient history and chess, and didn't go out much. His way of speaking was slow, calm, as if he were in no rush to prove anything. He was the opposite of the men I was usually drawn to. We crossed paths again weeks later at a bookstore downtown. He remembered me. He greeted me kindly, without ulterior motives, and invited me for coffee. I hesitated but accepted, because I had no plans, because I was alone that day. I wasn't expecting anything. But that first conversation left me unsettled. Not because he was brilliant, though he was in his quiet way, but because he looked at me as if he didn't need anything from me. He didn't judge me, didn't flirt, didn't analyze me. He saw me, and that disarmed me. Daniel started reaching out more often. He sent simple, never intrusive messages. He cared about me. He brought chocolates to my office, asked about my day, made me feel important without grand gestures. I didn't love him, not at first, but I felt safe, as if, for the first time, someone was willing to care for me without expecting anything in return. I agreed to be his girlfriend out of pity. It wasn't conscious, but I know it now. His way of loving me touched me. It scared me how transparent his love was. No one had ever looked at me like that. And somehow, I felt I had to reciprocate, like a debt I owed. As if rejecting someone so good would be too cruel for my conscience. So I said yes that my friends didn't understand. He's so ordinary, they said. And yes, he was. He wasn't the kind of man who sparked passion or jealousy. But with him, for a while I felt peace. And I thought that was enough. We got married 2 years after we started dating. I was 29, he was 33. It was a simple but beautiful wedding, held outdoors at a rented colonial house on the outskirts of the city. Daniel took care of almost everything, finding the venue, organizing the catering, designing the invitations by hand. Not because I didn't want to help, but because that's how he was, attentive to every detail, determined to make me feel special, even when I didn't ask for it. That I remember that day clearly. My dress was lace, understated but elegant. My mother cried when she saw me. My father hugged me tightly, though he was never very expressive. My aunts, uncles, cousins, childhood friends, and some coworkers were there. Daniel's family was smaller, just a younger sister and a widowed father who didn't talk much, but was visibly proud. His mother had died when he was a teenager, and he never spoke of her without his eyes clouding over. During the ceremony, Daniel couldn't stop looking at me. His eyes were misty. He held my hands so gently that I wanted to apologize for not feeling the same. But I didn't. I kissed him as expected. I smiled as expected. I walked beside him as expected. And for a moment, just a moment, I wanted to believe I was doing the right thing. Our honeymoon was in the south of the country, in a lakeside cabin. Daniel cooked for me, read aloud, held me at night. He was so happy, so completely happy that it hurt. It hurt because I couldn't match his intensity. It hurt knowing he was giving me his all, and I was only offering a polished version of myself. But I said nothing. I carried on. When we returned, we moved into an apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It had 2 bedrooms, a small terrace, and lots of natural light. We furnished it patiently. I chose the colors. He assembled the furniture. We painted the dining room wall navy blue together, and he said he'd never been happier than painting with me. It was a good start. Serious, quiet, stable. The first few months of marriage were good. Daniel remained thoughtful, kind, present. He left notes on the fridge, waited for me with hot tea when I came home late, accompanied me to visit my mother without complaint. We went to bed early, watched old movies, cooked together on weekends. Everything was proper, orderly, clean. And yet, I started to feel empty, like something was missing, though I couldn't name it. It was as if stability had become a cage, as if his love wasn't enough anymore. And though I didn't know it yet, that emptiness would be the beginning of the end. Our life together began like one of those stories that don't end well, quietly, without warning, with simple promises and the illusion that the everyday could be beautiful. At first, there was something almost magical about the domestic routine. We split chores without fighting, took turns making breakfast. He left dried flowers in my books, and I tried to make everything feel warm. We held hands at the market, picked out pantry jars together, sat on the terrace watching the sunset. Daniel spoke little, but listened with his whole soul. I talked a lot because deep down, I needed to fill the voids he didn't seem to notice. He was genuinely good, the kind of man who doesn't pretend or perform. He woke up before me to make coffee, tucked me in if I fell asleep on the couch, asked if I needed anything, even when he had nothing left to give. He cared for me as if I were fragile, as if he feared hurting me by mistake. I told myself that was love, and maybe it was, but something in me couldn't settle. A restless agitation, a constant need for more intensity, more excitement, more danger. With him, everything was proper, measured, predictable. And while that gave me peace, it also suffocated me. Over time, the magic of domesticity turned into repetition. The routine settled over us like a spiderweb no one bothered to brush away. Daniel remained the same, attentive, hardworking, sweet. But I began to see him differently. His plain shirts and shapeless pants irritated me. His focus on books, his unhurried walk, his love for safety drove me mad. He had no surprises, no secrets, no cracks. And I, without meaning to, started looking for cracks, for places where the air could get in. Even if it was cold, I grew quieter, stopped pretending, let my boredom show. I stopped laughing at his jokes, stopped seeking him out at night, started inventing reasons to go out, threw myself into work, answered his texts with single words. And he, with his endless patience, didn't complain. He just looked at me with silent sadness, as if he knew something was changing but couldn't admit it. Sometimes he'd make special dinners, buy books he knew I'd love, ask if everything was okay. I'd lie with a smile, say I was tired, stressed, needed space. And he, of course, gave it to me, because Daniel never pushed, never pried, never questioned. He was so good it sometimes felt unreal. How could someone love me so much and yet fail to make me want to run into his arms? I started seeing him as simple, dull, without fire, easy to love but impossible to desire. It tore me apart because I knew it wasn't fair, that I was the broken one, that there was nothing wrong with him. But I couldn't help it. His every tender gesture filled me with guilt, every touch with anger, every night by his side with loneliness. And in that emptiness, without knowing it, the worst was already taking shape, the inevitable that would change our lives forever. That I met him at a work training session. Luca. His name alone felt like a warning. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something about him you couldn't ignore. His voice, his way of speaking, an elegant arrogance that didn't need a shout to command attention. He was an external consultant from another city, only there for a week. But from the first day, I felt the air shift when he entered the room. I wasn't planning to be unfaithful. I didn't seek it out. I didn't leave the house one morning thinking, I'm going to destroy my marriage. But I did. It started with a casual conversation after work. Lucas said he liked my opinions, called me clear-headed, intelligent. He looked into my eyes in a way no one had in a long time, as if he could see beyond my facade, as if he knew I was dying inside. We started texting, professional at first, then personal. He asked about my tastes, my frustrations, my bad days, and I let myself get carried away. It wasn't sudden. It was a gentle slope, seemingly harmless at first. A coffee, a shared laugh, a light confession, a look that lingered too long. Luca made me feel alive, desired, heard. He was the opposite of Daniel, passionate, intense, direct. He called me beautiful, said he couldn't believe someone like me was trapped in such a dull life. And I, foolishly, believed him. I wanted to believe I deserved more, deserved fire. The first time we kissed was on a rainy afternoon in his car, in a mall parking lot. We'd been flirting for weeks without naming it, and when it happened, it felt like an inevitable accident. I didn't feel guilt, only vertigo, like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross but had longed to cross for ages. From there, everything spiraled. We met in discreet hotels, hourly apartments, anywhere the world couldn't see us. I lost myself in a version of myself that only existed with him, a woman desired, pursued, devoured. Something I hadn't felt in so long, something Daniel, unintentionally, no longer sparked in me. I started lying effortlessly, excuses for going out, fake meetings, work trips. Daniel didn't suspect a thing. He still had dinner ready when I came home. He still hugged me when I arrived late. He still asked if everything was okay, and I'd nod without looking at him. It was so easy to lie to him, so painfully easy, because he trusted me with a blind faith I never deserved. Luca didn't ask questions. He said he didn't care that I was married, as long as I kept coming back. And I, increasingly confused, convinced myself it was real, that maybe I deserved to leave everything for him, that maybe Daniel didn't need me anymore. But he did. He needed me more than I could understand. And when the truth came out, when I shattered his world with my betrayal, that's when I saw it. That's when I understood everything. That's when I realized my selfishness had destroyed the only person who loved me unconditionally. One afternoon, I had no intention of coming home early. I convinced myself every minute away from Daniel was an act of emotional justice, that I wasn't hurting him, that he wouldn't find out, that what he didn't know couldn't hurt him. There was no storm, no guilt, just the thick thrill of being with Luca, of sinking into a version of myself where I wasn't anyone's wife, where I had no duties, only desire. His body, his voice, his hands on my waist, it all felt separate from my other life, like two worlds I could live in without consequence. When I left Luca's apartment that afternoon, it was raining lightly, with a faint sadness that seemed to warn me of something. But I didn't think about signs. I only thought about wrapping up, giving a soft excuse, and faking normalcy. I'd done it so many times I didn't even tremble anymore. I knew the script by heart. But when I opened the door to our apartment, I knew something was wrong. The kitchen light was on. Daniel's keys were on the table, his briefcase by the couch. And there he was sitting, as if he'd been waiting for hours, his eyes red, his mouth tight. There was no anger in his face, just a quiet tremor, a contained collapse. "Where were you?" he asked in a voice I didn't recognize. It wasn't an accusation, it was a plea. I froze. My rehearsed answers, I got held up, I had a long meeting, don't worry, rang in my head. But something in his eyes broke me, something so deeply shattered that I knew he knew. I didn't know how or since when, but he knew. "So, for the first time, I didn't lie. I've been unfaithful," I said, as if the word weren't a stone hurled at the face of the man who loved me more than anyone. He sat still, took a deep breath, as if his body were trying not to break entirely. He looked at me like I was a stranger, and in a way I was. "The Laura he knew was gone. How long?" he asked. "Weeks," I whispered. His gaze dropped to the floor like a shattered glass. But he said nothing. He just stood slowly, grabbed his keys and briefcase, and paused at the door. "I don't want to know more. Don't explain. Don't try." And he left and I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I sat on the couch, still in the wrinkled clothes I'd worn with another man, and watched the door close behind him. It didn't hurt as much as it should have, because I still thought I was making the right choice. I still believed Luca was the answer, that I'd escaped a lukewarm life for a passionate one. I still told myself Daniel wasn't enough for me. The separation was quick. He didn't fight. He didn't ask for details. He didn't want to talk about love, betrayal, or hate. He just signed. And I, without hesitation, did the same, as if closing an uncomfortable chapter of a too simple novel. That night, I slept at Luca's place, thinking I was free. The divorce was swift. Neither of us wanted to face each other, or at least I didn't. Luca wasn't Daniel. He had no patience, no tenderness, only hunger. At first, that hunger made me feel alive. His jealousy seemed passionate, his demands flattering, his mood swings a necessary intensity. But as the weeks passed, the fantasy began to crack. He stopped looking at me with fascination, stopped asking how I felt, stopped holding me after sex. He started coming home late, snapping at me, correcting me, laughing at my insecurities, saying I was too intense, that he needed space, that we weren't serious. And I, who had left a marriage for him, began to panic. I asked for more, he gave less. I spoke of what we built together, even if it was a lie, and he said we were just having fun, that it wasn't his fault I'd ruined my life for an affair. That hit harder than anything else. We weren't a couple. We never were. He never saw me as more than a desire. And when that desire faded, there was nothing left, just a broken, abandoned woman who couldn't go back to what she destroyed. I tried to hold on, but Luca pulled away with cold precision. He called me too emotional, said he couldn't handle it, didn't want commitment, wasn't going to save me from the mess I'd made. One day, he stopped responding. He blocked me, and I was left in a rented apartment with broken photos of a past I'd scorned, haunted by the echo of an irreversible decision. Then I understood. I'd lost everything for nothing. I started dreaming of Daniel, not the man he was at the end, but the man he was at the beginning. His soft voice, his big hands holding mine, his awkward laugh when he burned the toast, the way he looked at me like I was everything. I dreamed of his "I made you coffee," his sweet mid-afternoon texts, the way he watched me when he thought I didn't notice. And I woke up crying, sobbing with my whole body, because he was gone. Because I banished him from my life with a coldness I'm now ashamed of. I tried calling him. He didn't answer. I tried finding him. He'd moved. I never saw him again. I heard nothing more about him. No one would tell me anything. And I began to understand what I'd truly done. I didn't just lose him, I destroyed him. I broke something in him that can't be fixed. I taught him that even the purest love can turn into betrayal. I showed him that his way of loving, which I now miss so desperately, wasn't enough for me. And for what? For an empty passion, a false promise, a lie I told myself to justify my selfishness. Now I look in the mirror and don't recognize the woman I was, the one who rejected him, who thought she was above his affection, who mistook stability for mediocrity, who couldn't value tenderness because she'd never been truly hurt. Now I understand what I lost. Not just a husband, but the only man who loved me with kindness. And now, every night, I'm the one crying for him.